I'd like to welcome Byron Stripling, who has some of the most memorable appearances with the Cleveland Pops. Just love your performances, and it's just an honor to be with you today.
Thank you, Carl. And can I just say something? First of all, I'm embarrassed to be here with you because you once again have outdressed me. You always do. And I'm just waiting for that moment in this conversation when you will open us up and show your lining of your jacket. If you don't do it, I would prefer, because it wouldn't embarrass me as much.
This is very plain. Nothing about this.
I love the red one when you have that one.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Well, we're celebrating Black History Month with you and several other guests. And maybe you can just tell us about, the great African-American artists who have been such an amazing influence to the music world, and which ones to you especially?
Sure. I mean, that's a great question. And I think one of the things we need to remember is that great artists and some of the great Black artists, they have moved all eras of history through. We've been through so many eras in this country, and I just want to stop for a moment and acknowledge and honor the great musicians that are really dealing with some hard stuff right now. The great filmmaker Ken Burns has said, this is one of the pivotal times in history. The first one would probably be the Civil War, the second, the Great Depression, and the third was World War II. And the fourth is this current pandemic that we sit in. And I just want to acknowledge that, all us musicians, the only reason we stand here because we have great donors and people that love the arts. And so we always appreciative of that. I know the Cleveland Pops has dedicated followers, and under your leadership for I think 37 years, they have flourished because of that. But we are mindful that we're in a difficult period of time. Black musicians have always been important in moving through the joy of even oppression and hardship. Frederick Douglass often said, I've got three things. I've got my pen, I've got my voice, and I've got my vote. Those are three things he always said. And I think as musicians, we have a fourth thing, and that is music. And so what great Black jazz musicians and the Negro spirituals that came before that, the gospel music that came before that, and then after that, the great soul music, all that, even in spite of oppression and all the things that people went through, was full of joy and peace and happiness and love. That Douglas also said, we don't want to do the same thing that people have done to us. We want to celebrate life. And so through that music, you hear that. So when you hear a song like, Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child, that song speaks to the heartbreak of it's a Negro spiritual, of people not having, coming in from Africa, and they're now motherless and they're fatherless. And then when you hear the great Negro spirituals like I've been buked and I've been scorned, I've been talked about, shows you born was one of mine. And they were also prolific and insightful. There was a great Negro spiritual that said, everybody talking about heaven ain't going there. And that was the realization that even though that these people as slaves had been given Bibles and converted to Christianity, that they saw that the very people that gave them those Bibles were the same people that in many cases, an uncomfortable truth was that they were raping the people that were serving them as slaves. They were beating them and all those things. And so they realized early on that everybody talking about heaven ain't going there. We keep going forward into the civil rights movement, and then we've got gospel music and spirituals, and those move that, whole thing. The great John Lewis said, we would be nothing without music. There was a lady that was marching during the Montgomery bus boycott, and they asked her, they said, aren't you getting tired? Because to remember that period of time, people decided that if we hit the bus people in the pocket and get off the buses, then they'll have to change things over and let us sit wherever we want on the bus. And so they marched every single day. And Martin Luther King went to Montgomery. He preached every night. But before he said a word, he demanded that they sing. And that's that great thing that we've always known, is that I sing not because I'm happy, but I'm happy because I sing. And so Martin Luther King knew that. So we sang all those great spirituals that said, keep your eyes on the prize. You know, I ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. And there was an old lady walking in Montgomery, and the media pulled up beside her, says, "Ma'am, aren't you getting tired? You're walking to work every day." Realizing that they not only did carpools in the Black community that they arranged for themselves, of the funeral parlor owners and all of the people that had money, they had these carpools, but some people couldn't do that. So they had to walk to work 45 minutes, 1 hour to get to their job, but they were dedicated to that. And they say, "Ma'am, aren't you getting tired?" And she said, "Well, my feet are tired, but my soul is rested." And I believe she said that because the music was playing in her head. If we continue to fast forward, all the great jazz musicians used all this music. John Coltrane gave us songs like Five Girls from Alabama, or he just called it Alabama, in celebration of the big blowout that they had in Alabama at their church that killed 4 little Black girls. Even Louis Armstrong did it. He tried to do it through song, but he also demanded certain things in his gigs that had to be satisfied before he played there. He also performed with integrated bands. We also had so many white people that helped us during this process of this, like Artie Shaw hired Billie Holiday, and how's he going to do that? But she got on the bus, and of course, this is a risk for Artie Shaw because people are going to go, "We don't want that Black lady Billie Holiday singing on our stage." And he made a financial decision. He told them, if she doesn't sing, we don't play. So we honor Artie Shaw for that. We honor Benny Goodman for the Benny Goodman Quartet, who had Lionel Hampton and Teddy Wilson, right? 2 great people that were in that group. So we honor those people and so many others. Artie Shaw also had Roy Eldridge at one point playing trumpet with him. So throughout history, not only is these contributions of African Americans important musically, but they're also important to civil rights, but bigger than civil rights are human rights. And I always want to make that distinction. It's really all under one umbrella, and that is the right of humans. And artists do it through their song. And I'll just mention one other example is Billie Holiday, even using it as protest when she sang the song about lynching, which I'm forgetting the name of the song now, Strange Fruit. When she did that song, which they immediately banned as soon as she recorded it. But that was a protest song in protest of the horrible things that were done to Black people through lynching. There's now a whole museum, and we know that during the early period of America, all the way through the 1950s, there were more than 6,000 lynchings of Black men. So the music continued to carry us through. So that's a long answer to your very short question.
Really, that's a great answer too. How about the orchestras you've played with? You've played all over the world now. Any performances stand out in your mind in one sense or another?
Well, okay, let me start at the top, and that would be with the Cleveland Pops. and that's always a great experience because you have one of the great halls in the world that you get to perform in. And so that hall is second to none, and what you've done with that orchestra is second to none. You also are one of the few people that knows how to integrate jazz musicians throughout your orchestra. And it's probably because it's the Pops Orchestra, but even Pops orchestras don't do this. So one of the things that you've done, Carl, is you can always have a Jack Shantz, people like that, good drummer. You always have the right people in the right places. So we get that orchestral feel, which is so important, but we also get that feeling of swing, which comes from these individual players that not only know orchestral music, but are versed like you are in jazz, and they know the feeling of what we're trying to get to. One of the things that we know is that notation is inadequate for what jazz expresses. In other words, those notes on the page have to be interpreted, and you're a master at letting the orchestra know how to get the juice out of those particular songs so that they sound good. So it doesn't sound contrived. So Cleveland Pops is on the top of the list. Obviously, whenever you play with the Boston Pops, that's a fun because of the history of what that organization is. So I've done that many, many times and even toured with them. And so I don't want to leave anybody out. I love obviously working with Pittsburgh Symphony, and there's so many others. Houston Symphony, those are highlights in terms of my performing career.
Excellent. And where did you get your start, and what Black musicians or teachers were particularly influential to you?
Uh-huh. So my father was a choir director, and so when you're a choir director, that means that you have to sing in the choir, and you'll also have to sing whatever part he'd like you to sing. So if he's missing sopranos, altos, tenors, or basses, you have to sing those solos or those parts. I never had to do a soprano or an alto, thank you. So, but that was my beginnings, growing up in an environment that was all about music. My father was a classical singer, and we came from the generation of Black people. My father, we were part of the Great Migration, and the Great Migration is Black people moving from the South up north to find a better way and a better life for themselves. And so we came really very poor family, and we moved up. First, we got to Kentucky for my father to get his master's and then his doctorate. He went to Colorado, and then from there, he never looked back, but we were looking for a better way of life. All the way through that, my parents emphasized a couple things: great music they loved, and reading and education. So I have a house full of books. I need to get rid of so many of them, but they really emphasize that. And that's sort of the during that generation of Black people in the 60s, the emphasis, and you will never hear people talk about this because it's almost unspoken. The emphasis on Black families at this time was get your education. It would have been a sin for me not to go to college for my parents. It would have they would have went crazy on me. So I did that. So I went to Eastman School of Music because, I fell into the music thing, and I got great training there from great professors and all. And I lied to you. I actually did not graduate because I kept leaving to go do gigs. So I toured with Clark Terry right after I was a freshman. And then I came back to Eastman, and right before I was supposed to leave, I went with Lionel Hampton. And then right after that, Woody Herman's big band, right into Count Basie's band. And then I started doing all kind of crazy things. So those people I mentioned were really my teachers. Every band I got to sit in, that was on the job training for me. So when I sat in the Count Basie band, that's when I realized that everything that was on that paper had nothing to do with it. They had their own way of playing and interpreting those things. I learned that because we know that jazz is an oral art form. It's really a language, and every language has in it a vocabulary and an accent. And the vocabulary are the things you play, and the accent obviously are the way that you play them. So I learned my vocabulary, my accent, and the language of jazz really from the guys in the Count Basie band, not from them telling me, but from me absorbing it. Every night I was on the stage with the great Freddie Green, who played acoustic guitar on that band. And I was listening to people like Thad Jones, who was leading the band at one point, and the great Frank Foster, and all those great musicians. For me, it was a dream, Carl, because I was sitting by people that I had heard on records all my life, and now I got to learn from them. So it was a significant thing for me.
Great. And just out of curiosity, do you do physical exercise to keep your stamina, or you just practice a lot?
I try to practice a lot, and I just want to know, because I know that I think it's Jim Rupp told me, is it your exercise bike you do every day or something like that, or treadmill or something like that?
I used to run, but I only do treadmill now.
Yeah. So since the pandemic, in fact, I got back from my walk 2 hours ago, but even in the snow there, it's freezing here, as I'm sure it is in Cleveland. I have dedicated myself during, COVID, that I have no excuse. I can't say that I have too much to do because we have a lot more free time. Most of my meetings are by Zoom and all that. So I've walked every day, but probably 5 or 6 during the pandemic since like March 7th or something like that. Last March 7th. Yeah.
Wow.
So
good for you.
Yeah. I mean, I used to be even more into exercise, but then the kids come and then it flows. So it was ebbing and flowing, and I could see the ebb and flow on my stomach.
Yeah, good for you. I mean, your stamina has always floored me because, end of the gig and you're just as strong as the beginning, and it's really something to behold. But I've seen you actually through I remember your first appearance. You played great, but just to see how comfortable you are with the audiences is just fantastic. And, you know, it's just a combination of great playing, but also great singing, but great communicating with the audience, which I think is just great. I mean, I just enjoy your banter because it's inspiring to me. I said, wow, I got to use that next time.
You can have everything I say for free, no charge. You know, I was trained by three and mentored by two or three people. The first one I'll mention is a guy named Fivish Finkel. His son just passed away. It was a dear friend of mine named Ein Finkel. Fivish Finkel was one of the stars of the Yiddish theater, and he was an amazing performer. When I moved to New York, he said, I want you to be part of my family. I'm going to do a show. Now, Fivish Finkel was also very famous for a show called Boston Public, and there was one other show where he was a big actor on television. He did a show in New York City off Broadway, and he had me be in his band, and he would introduce everybody in the band. They were all white Jewish people, and then he'd come to me and he'd go, and my other son, Byron Stripling, and everybody would laugh like you're laughing, and he goes, you guys don't believe me, and he'd put the mic up to me. He says, Byron, what's your favorite food? And I'd say kreplach, and then they would love it because, you know. So that was all his idea to do that. But I sat there and watched him for a million shows, and I just did what he did. Before that, there was another guy. His name was Maurice Hines, and Maurice Hines was Gregory Hines' brother. And if you have a long memory like me, you'll remember Hines and Dad was the great tap dancing team. And so that's where Gregory came out of. Maurice Hines became a director and a choreographer, and I became very close to him when I did a show called Satchmo, America's Musical Legend. And I became the star of that show in 1988. There I met Maurice Hines. He choreographed the show. We got a great friendship. The show toured the country. We started in New Orleans, North Carolina, Atlanta, ended up at the Kennedy Center for 6 weeks. And then we did Boston for three weeks where they hated us. And then we closed after that. But I maintained my friendship with Maurice Hines and worked with him often, had him play with my bands and or sing and play and tap with my bands. And so I learned a lot from him. He also introduced me to my wife. So I'm forever indebted to him for that.
And the third person?
Oh, third person, just two. I was lying.
Okay.
I'm horrible with my lies. Although I'm sure there's a third person I could point to. Probably, well, I mentioned him, Thad Jones. And Thad Jones was one of the great trumpet players. He had his own band called the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Big Band.
Right.
And so I got to meet him and work with him in the Count Basie band. And look, they're all mentors. I mean, Dizzy Gillespie would be another one. I toured with Dizzy Gillespie's big band all through Europe and all through the United States. Then we did a tour with Count Basie's band with Dizzy as guest soloist. I, at that point, was taking care of Dizzy, helping him with all his luggage and things like that, and developed an amazing friendship with him. And during that time, you know, he was older, and but I got to sit with him every day in the hotel. We'd get his bags ready to go, and we got to talk trumpet. We got to talk music, and you know, there's so many lessons in those little things. He used to say, "I keep one foot in the past and one foot in the future," and that's the way he likes to play. That you'll hear that in his playing, that sense of the roots of the past, which would be blues and gospel and all those things, but harmonically, melodically, you hear other things rhythmically that come from the modern stuff. So let's let Dizzy be that third person.
Great. Well, thank you, Byron. Again, we wish you all the best, and thank you for being with us, and look forward to that day when you're back with us on stage at Severance Hall. Just right down I-71.
Absolutely. It's a joy to talk with you, Carl. Congratulations on your continued success. And I just hope that, again, I want to be on stage with you as soon as possible.
Great. Thank you so much. Stay well.
Yep.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay. Talk to you. Bye-bye.